The median American between 50 and 59 years old has $53,000 saved for retirement. Not an estimate or a projection. That is Fidelity's 2024 data pulled from 45 million actual live accounts. And if you run the standard 4% withdrawal rule on that number, the rule that the entire retirement planning industry built its credibility on, you get $2,120 per year. Not per month, per year. That is $176 a month from a lifetime of contributions. Stack the average Social Security check on top, which was approximately $1,900 per month in 2025. And the median American retiree in their 50s is looking at just over $2,100 a month in total retirement income, with zero buffer, zero margin. One car repair away from the math collapsing entirely. Now, here is what makes this genuinely strange. That person, the one with $53,000 saved, probably does not feel behind because they stopped checking decades ago. You, on the other hand, feel behind, significantly behind. And almost every financially disciplined person I have ever talked to feels the same way. Not vaguely, specifically. Like there was a meeting where someone handed out a roadmap and you somehow did not get the memo and now you are perpetually catching up to a destination you cannot locate. Today, I am going to show you 3 specific data-backed signs that you are not behind at all. That you are, by every measure that actually determines long-term financial outcomes, operating well above the statistical average in ways that are almost entirely invisible to you because you have been measuring yourself against the wrong thing for years. Here's what I am going to show you. 3 concrete signs drawn from Federal Reserve data, Fidelity account data, IRS contribution records, and peer-reviewed behavioral finance research. I will give you the exact numbers broken down by age group so you are not comparing yourself to a fantasy that some personal finance blogger invented to make you feel inadequate enough to buy a course. You are comparing yourself to the actual distribution of where American households are right now. Because vague reassurance changes nothing. Specific numbers do. By the way, I built a free early retirement calculator because most of the online ones are mathematically wrong. They understate sequence of returns risk and completely ignore tax drag on withdrawal. Mine uses the actual methodology that BlackRock and Vanguard use internally to stress test retirement portfolios, and it will show you the specific weak points in your plan, not a generic one. I only ask for your email to send the report because I do not store any of your financial data. Link is in the description. Before I get into the 3 signs, I need to give you the frame. One specific mental model that I want you to hold through this entire video because it is going to come back several times. Imagine you have been playing a serious, long game for years, one that required real discipline, delayed purchases, boring decisions, skipping things other people were visibly enjoying, making the unglamorous choice repeatedly while watching other people make the glamorous one, and you are winning. You have been winning for a while, but you are staring at the wrong scoreboard, someone else's scoreboard. The one that shows current model year trucks and recently renovated kitchens and whatever people are posting from their beach rental this week. And because you have been reading that scoreboard instead of the real one, you genuinely believe you are losing a game you have been quietly dominating. That is exactly what is happening to a significant portion of financially responsible Americans right now. They are winning the actual game. They feel like losers because they never check the right scoreboard. Everything I am going to show you today is about pulling your eyes back to the real one. In a few minutes, I am going to show you what 401k balances look like broken down by age group. The gap between where most Americans actually sit and where you probably sit is going to be uncomfortable in the best possible way. But first, I want to start with the sign that sounds the least impressive on paper, because the data behind it is more alarming than almost anything else in personal finance. Sign number 1, you have an emergency fund. I know exactly how that lands. Bear with me for 90 seconds. A 2024 Bankrate survey found that 56% of Americans could not cover a $1,000 emergency using their savings, more than half the country. Not a catastrophic medical event, not a job loss, a single ordinary, completely predictable in the abstract emergency. And this number has sat stubbornly between 50 and 60% for most of the last decade, through bull markets, through record corporate profits, through the longest economic expansion in American history. It barely moved. That tells you this is not a temporary liquidity problem caused by some unusual economic moment. This is the structural baseline. This is how the majority of Americans are actually living. Think about what that means in practice. There's a story a friend of mine told me about his uncle, a man named Ray. Ray worked a stable government position for 11 years. Solid salary, benefits, pension contributions coming out of every paycheck exactly as they should. 2 cars, kids and activities, a house in a decent neighborhood. From the outside, Ray had it figured out. The appearance of financial stability was completely convincing. Then his transmission failed. $1,300. Ray did not have it liquid. He had retirement contributions going out automatically. He technically had home equity. But $1,300 accessible within a week without a penalty? He did not have it. He put it on a credit card at 22% annual interest. It took him 8 months to pay it down. That $1,300 repair ended up costing him closer to $1,780 by the time the interest finished compounding. He lost almost $500 in pure interest on a single transmission repair because there was no buffer between his income and his obligations. Ray was not reckless. Ray was not bad at math. Ray was living exactly the way 56% of Americans live. No margin, no slack. One ordinary event away from a financial chain reaction that cost him real money and real months. Here is what makes this statistically worse. Credit card balances in the United States reached $1.17 trillion in 2024, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. The average credit card interest rate in early 2025 was hovering around 21%. So the majority of the country is not saving. They are borrowing at 21% and being surprised every month when the gap between income and outgo refuses to close. That is not a behavior problem. That is a structural trap that absorbs every dollar of margin before it can ever become a habit. I think most people conceptualize emergency funds incorrectly, and that misunderstanding causes them to undervalue what they already have. Here is a framework I find more useful than the standard advice. There are 3 levels. Level 1 is survival mode. Less than 1 month of liquid expenses saved. This is where the majority of Americans are. 1 missed paycheck away from a cascading problem that takes months and real dollars to unwind. Level 2 is stability. 1 to 3 months of expenses in accessible savings, earning something. This is where the intentional, disciplined saver lives. Level 3 is operational freedom. 3 to 6 months of expenses parked in a high-yield savings account, earning 4% or better, completely untouched, never mentally earmarked for anything else. At level 2 or level 3, you have something most Americans structurally lack: the ability to absorb a shock without it derailing everything downstream. An emergency fund does not exist to cover the emergency. It exists to protect your investment contributions, your long-term compounding, your ability to stay in the game through the disruption without making a permanent financial decision in response to a temporary problem. That is not a minor distinction. That is the difference between Ray and someone who absorbs the transmission repair and does not miss a single investment contribution because of it. A 2023 Federal Reserve survey found that 22% of American adults had 0 savings. 0. Not a small balance. Nothing. Another 22% had less than 1 month of expenses. So 44% of the country is operating at effectively no cushion. If you have more than 1 month of liquid expenses set aside right now, you are in the top half of the country on one of the most foundational financial metrics in existence. You think the problem is that you do not have enough. But actually, the problem for most Americans is that they are comparing their real level 2 stability to someone else's staged appearance of level 3 abundance when that person is secretly operating at level 0 and running a deficit. Wrong scoreboard, producing the exact wrong conclusion. Now, I want to introduce 2 people before we get to the retirement numbers. Their names are Dave and Kevin. Remember them. I will finish their story at the end of this video. Dave earns $130,000 a year. His house is well maintained His truck is current model year. His kitchen was renovated 2 years ago. His kids are in 3 different activities. From the outside, Dave has the life. Kevin earns $85,000 a year. 6-year-old sedan with 112,000 miles on it. Rents an apartment that is functional. 1 modest vacation per year. Does not discuss money at social gatherings. Hold on to both of them. Now here is where people go quiet. The retirement savings numbers broken down by age are low enough that most financially disciplined people refuse to believe them when they first see the source. But these are not survey estimates derived from a sample. Fidelity manages more 401k accounts than any other provider in the country. 45 million accounts. When they publish median balance figures, it is actual transactional data from tens of millions of real people. That is as close to ground truth as publicly available retirement data gets. Sign number 2. Your retirement savings exceed the median for your age group. Here are the medians. If you are in your 20s, the median 401k balance is approximately $5,000. In your 30s, around $11,000. In your 40s, approximately $36,000. In your 50s, approximately $60,000. $60,000. And here's the piece that makes these numbers even lower than they look. These figures only count people who have a 401k account to begin with. Approximately 30% of private sector workers have no access to any employer-sponsored retirement plan at all. When you factor them into the distribution, the true median for all American workers drops further. The Fidelity data already shows you a best case picture of a population that is skewed toward people who at minimum have employer plans. The real distribution is worse. Let me be precise about what $60,000 actually produces in retirement. At the 4% withdrawal rule, $60,000 generates $2,400 per year. That is $200 per month. Add the average Social Security benefit of approximately $1,900 per month, and you have total monthly retirement income somewhere around $2,100. The federal poverty guideline for a single adult in 2025 is approximately $1,255 per month. The median retiree clears the poverty line, but by a margin so thin that a single medical expense, a single appliance failure, a single month where one unexpected bill arrives and the math stops working entirely. There's no slack in that system. None. I read a case in a behavioral finance paper that I think about every time I look at this data. A financial planner had a client in his late 40s who came in convinced he was catastrophically behind on retirement, genuinely anxious about it. He had run his own numbers against some theoretically optimal savings trajectory he had found online, and the gap between his actual balance and the number he thought he should have was devastating him emotionally. He had $240,000 saved across a 401k and a brokerage account. The planner pulled up the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances and pointed to a single row in the data. The median net worth for American households between 45 and 54 was approximately $247,000 as of 2022. This man was almost exactly at the median. Not at the bottom, not catastrophically behind. Statistically average, which, given how the actual distribution looks, represented a genuinely workable position. He had spent years in low-grade financial dread, real stress, affecting real decisions, based entirely on comparing himself to a benchmark he had invented, not a benchmark derived from actual measured data. He was reading the wrong scoreboard the entire time, and the wrong scoreboard told him he was losing. The Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances is the most comprehensive wealth data set available in this country. It is conducted every 3 years and includes both financial and non-financial assets across the full wealth distribution. For households between 45 and 54, the median net worth is approximately $247,000. The 75th percentile, meaning the cutoff to be in the top 25% of households in that age range, is approximately $837,000. The 90th percentile begins around $2 million. These are the actual benchmarks, not aspirational targets designed to induce financial insecurity in the reader. Real data measured from real households, By the way, hit subscribe if you like what you are seeing. YouTube's algorithm may never show you my videos again if you do not. I do not run affiliate links or paid placements on products I do not own. The deal is straightforward. You watch. I keep making these. Let me show you a real scenario with specific numbers, because abstract percentiles land differently than a concrete situation. Say you are 43 years old. You have $180,000 spread across a 401k, a Roth IRA, and a basic brokerage account. You are contributing $12,000 per year total. That is less than the maximum contribution limit for either account type individually. So this is not an aggressive contribution level by any standard definition. You assume 7% average annual growth, a reasonable historical approximation for a diversified index fund portfolio adjusted for inflation. Over 22 years until age 65, at that rate, you accumulate approximately $1.08 million under the 4% withdrawal rule. $1.08 million generates $43,200 per year before Social Security. For most people, combined with a Social Security benefit, somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000 annually, depending on work history, that is a functional retirement, not lavish, not passive income from a Maldives villa. Functional, real, and sustainable. And you got there contributing $12,000 per year, doing nothing exotic, selecting no individual stocks, timing nothing. The median 40-something has $36,000 saved. At $180,000, you are not at the median. You are somewhere in the top 20 to 25% for your age group. And the person in that position has almost certainly been privately telling themselves they are behind for years. Here's the honest part that never makes it into a retirement calculator. You can run these numbers all day. You can know the 4% rule inside and out, know exactly where you rank in the Federal Reserve distribution, bookmark this video, and share it with your spouse. That knowledge, by itself, does not build the plan. Knowing the score and building a system that responds correctly to what the score means are two fundamentally different activities. I built a digital book called The Exit Code. It is an analysis of 50 years of actual retirement data distilled into a mathematical framework for figuring out when you can realistically exit the working world on your own terms. Not a motivational framework, not a belief system book. Research built into 8 chapters with no filler based on what the data actually shows about how retirement succeed and fail. 2 things from it are directly relevant to what I just showed you. First, the 4% rule has a structural failure that most people never encounter until they are already in retirement. The rule assumes your investment returns arrive in a smooth, predictable sequence. They never do. A bad sequence of returns in the first 3 to 5 years of retirement can permanently impair a portfolio that would have survived a different sequence perfectly, even with identical average returns over 30 years. The exit code walks through what I call the dynamic withdrawal method, a rate adjustment approach based on actual market conditions rather than a fixed assumption, which historically extends portfolio longevity significantly compared to the static 4% model. Second, if you retire or get forced out of work before 65, there is an insurance gap that almost no financial calculator ever accounts for. The out-of-pocket cost for a relatively healthy couple to bridge private health insurance from early retirement to Medicare eligibility has been estimated at approximately $14,000 per year. That is what I call the $14,000 invisible bill. It is the single expense that destroys more early retirement plans than market crashes, and most people discover it only after the decision has already been made. You can get the exit code through the link in the description. It costs less than 1 dinner out for 2 people. The math on waiting costs you considerably more than the book. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because sign number 3 is the one that actually separates above average from genuinely and meaningfully ahead. And it is not about how much money you have at this moment. It is about what the money is doing. Sign number 3, you are investing, not saving. A lot of people who have the discipline to save never make the second decision. The decision to put money into something that compounds. And the difference over 30 years is not a modest improvement. It is a difference between a functional retirement and a stressful one. The average annual inflation rate in the United States over the last 30 years has been approximately 2.8%. If you have $50,000 sitting in a standard savings account at a major bank, earning effectively zero, which is still where a significant portion of big bank accounts pay, even after the Federal Reserve raised rates substantially, you are losing approximately $1,400 per year in purchasing power, silently. The account still says $50,000 every single day. It just buys progressively less each year without triggering a single notification, without setting off any alarm, without giving you any feedback that anything is wrong, compounding working against you invisibly, requiring no action from you whatsoever. Flip that decision. $50,000 invested in a basic S&P 500 index fund 30 years ago, held through 2001, held through 2008, held through the March 2020 collapse, all of it would have grown at approximately 10.5% annually in nominal terms. Real returns after inflation, somewhere between 7 and 7.5%. That $50,000 becomes approximately $980,000 over 30 years. Same starting capital. One different decision, two completely different lives at 65. Here is what I find more interesting than the math, because the math is straightforward and most people already know it at some level. A Gallup 2023 survey found that approximately 53% of American adults own stocks in any form, including inside retirement accounts, which means nearly half of all American adults own none. Zero exposure to the single asset class that has compounded private wealth more reliably than any other in the last century. And within that 53% who do own stocks, a substantial portion are so underweighted in equities relative to what long-term wealth building actually requires that the practical difference from owning nothing is smaller than you would assume. Having 3% of your net worth in an index fund while keeping 97% in a low-yield savings account does not meaningfully change your retirement outcome. It just gives you something to check on your phone during a correction and feel bad about. The IRS data on 401k contributions is specific about this. In 2023, approximately 14% of 401k participants maxed out their annual contribution limit. 14. If you contribute consistently to a retirement account, not necessarily at the maximum, not with any particular sophistication, simply consistently, without stopping during market downturns or job transitions or periods of life stress, you are in a behavioral category that the majority of people with comparable incomes never sustain long enough for it to matter. I ran my own business for over 10 years. I had accountants and fiscal attorneys around me constantly. People who spent their professional lives moving significant capital through complex structures. And the thing that genuinely surprised me, the thing I was not expecting from people who lived inside financial systems professionally, was how often they made purely emotional decisions with their personal portfolios. One of them, sharp, deeply experienced, had built a highly successful practice over decades. In March of 2020, he liquidated his entire stock allocation, convinced the market was going to zero. Not 60% down, zero. He watched the daily declines, absorbed the psychological weight of each session, and at some point, the emotional pain of watching the number drop exceeded his rational understanding of what 50 years of market history said about long-term recovery patterns. He sold near the bottom. He missed the recovery that brought the S&P 500 to new highs within months. Then he waited too long, watching from the sidelines as the market climbed, bought back in near the peak, locked in his losses, while also missing the gains in a single sequence of two decisions. He did all of this with more financial information available to him than most retail investors will encounter in a lifetime of investing. That is not a math problem. That is a brain problem. Kahneman and Tversky established this mechanism in the late 70s. Loss aversion. The psychological pain of losing a dollar is approximately 2 to 2.5 times more intense than the pleasure of gaining a dollar of equal value. Which means a 5% decline in your portfolio does not register emotionally as -5. It registers closer to -12. And that gap between the actual number and the felt experience is precisely where the majority of long-term wealth evaporates. People sell near the bottom, wait on the sidelines until the market feels safe again, which is always near the top, and then buy back in shortly before the next correction. Then repeat the entire sequence. The Dalbar study has tracked actual investor returns versus index fund returns every year since the early 90s. The average equity fund investor has underperformed the S&P 500 by 3 to 4 percentage points annually over long periods. Not primarily because of fees, because of timing decisions. They sell low and buy high, consistently, across every single market cycle observed in the data. The market dropped 2.5% today. Emotional investor opens the brokerage app, opens a Reddit thread, types 3 paragraphs about Federal Reserve policy. Your index fund does not have feelings. Your index fund did not read the thread. Moving on. The index does not feel anything. And not feeling anything is an enormous structural advantage in long-term investing. The way to capture the index's returns is not to find better investments. It is to remove as much behavioral access to the sell button as structurally possible. Automate contributions before you can think about them. Set the allocation and create friction between yourself and any decision to change it. Not because you are not smart enough to make the decision, because the research shows that even the smartest people make the wrong decision at exactly the wrong moment when the emotional pressure is high enough. My accountant friend with the highly successful practice proved that. 3 to 4 percentage points per year of underperformance on $200,000 over 20 years, assuming 7% average market returns, represents approximately $162,000 in lost compounding. That is the cost of having emotional access to a sell button and using it at the wrong time. The difference between an above average investor and an average one is almost never the investments they chose. It is the decisions they did not make when the market made them want to. But now you might think the problem is visible success, that the people who look ahead of you probably are ahead of you. And this is where the entire frame has to invert completely. Stay with me, because this next part changes everything about how you read the people around you. Net worth is invisible. Income is visible. Debt is invisible. Spending is visible. And American consumer culture has spent the last 40 years optimizing for visible signals of wealth over actual accumulation of it. The result is a country where the visual signals and the financial reality have almost completely decoupled. What you see tells you almost nothing about what is actually on the scoreboard. Here is where Dave and Kevin finish their story. Dave earns $130,000 a year. His house is well maintained. His truck is current model year and financed over 72 months. His kitchen was renovated 2 years ago, financed through a home equity line. His kids are in 3 different activities. He contributes 5% to his 401k because that is the minimum required to capture the employer match, and then he stops. He carries approximately $22,000 in combined credit card and personal loan balances accumulated over several years of living at the edge of his income. His net worth at 47 years old is approximately $90,000. The majority of it, theoretical home equity, with a significant mortgage balance still outstanding. Kevin earns $85,000 a year, drives a 6-year-old sedan with 112,000 miles on it, paid off 3 years ago, rents an apartment that is functional, takes 1 modest vacation per year, contributes 15% to his 401k, maxes his Roth IRA every year. Whatever remains after essential expenses goes into a basic brokerage account holding an S&P 500 index fund. He does not post about money, does not discuss it at social gatherings. His net worth at 47 is approximately $510,000. Dave looks richer than Kevin by every visible signal available. The truck, the house, the kitchen renovation, the lifestyle. Dave may feel richer than Kevin on any given Tuesday. Dave is worth approximately 5.5 times less than Kevin in actual net worth. Dave is going to work until his late 60s, possibly longer. His retirement is not a plan at this point. It is a hope with a mortgage attached. Kevin, assuming 8% average annual returns and continued contributions, is on track to cross $1.2 million before he turns 60. He is going to stop working while Dave is still financing the next model year. And here's the piece of this I find genuinely funny in a grim way. Dave's visible success actively costs him compounding. The truck requires financing. The financing charges interest. The interest compounds in the wrong direction. The interest payment comes out of income that could have been invested. And the money that was never invested cannot compound into the amount that would eventually have made the truck payment feel irrelevant. Dave's wrong scoreboard is not neutral. It is actively destroying his ability to build a real score. A 2023 survey from Northwestern Mutual found that the average American believed they needed $1.27 million to retire comfortably. The actual median retirement savings balance for Americans approaching retirement was nowhere near that figure. The gap between what people believe is required and what the median person has accumulated is somewhere in the range of 20 times. And the people most likely to have an accurate financial self-assessment are the ones who check the real scoreboard with any regularity. Not obsessively, just enough to know which game they are actually winning. Your neighbor, who has been offering unsolicited financial opinions at every neighborhood gathering, his net worth might be negative, not in a catastrophic, extraordinary situation way. In a completely ordinary, financed everything, spent every margin, never checked the actual scoreboard way, and you have no way of knowing because net worth does not come up at barbecues, but car brands do. Now, let me give you 3 specific things to do with this. Not generic, calibrated to exactly what I have been showing you. First, calculate your actual net worth this week. Not your account balance, not your annual income, your net worth. Add your retirement account balances, your brokerage and savings accounts, your home equity if applicable. Then, subtract every outstanding obligation, mortgage balance, car loans, credit card balances, any other debt. That final number is your position on the real scoreboard. The Federal Reserve 2022 data gives you the actual benchmarks by age. For households 45 to 54, the median net worth is $247,000. For 55 to 64, approximately $570,000. Put your number next to those. Not next to your neighbor's truck. Not next to whatever projection some financial influencer posted to make you feel behind enough to click something. Second, if you do not have 3 months of liquid expenses in a high-yield savings account earning 4% or better right now, that is your single highest priority financial move before anything else. Not because 4% is exciting, because the absence of that buffer will derail every other financial decision you attempt to build on top of it. Ray's transmission cost $1,300. By the time the interest compounded, it cost him $1,780. And it cost him 8 months of payments. And it cost him the psychological weight of carrying that balance while trying to make other financial decisions. The buffer is not defensive. It is what protects your ability to stay in the game through a disruption without converting a temporary problem into a permanent financial setback. Third, automate your investment contributions and then create as much structural distance as possible between yourself and the decision to sell them. The Dalbar study is consistent across every decade it has measured. The gap between what the market returns and what the average investor captures is 3 to 4 percentage points annually. And it comes almost entirely from emotional timing decisions. Over 30 years on $200,000, that gap is the difference between a retirement that works and one that does not. The solution is not sophistication. It is removing the emotional access point. Set the allocation once. Automate the contributions, then get out of your own way and let compounding do what it has done reliably across every 30-year window in the history of the S&P 500. Financial Advisor explains that you need active management to navigate modern market complexity. Charges you 1% of assets annually for the navigation. On $200,000 invested over 30 years at 7%, that 1% fee costs you approximately $170,000 in foregone compounding. What you got for that fee? Quarterly meetings, a brochure with stock photos of sailboats on it, and an index fund with extra steps. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. That is not a catchphrase. That is 40 years of evidence across every market cycle, every income level, every economic regime in the data. Kevin's entire strategy fits in one sentence. Contribute 15% to low-cost index funds, automate it, and do not touch it. His net worth at 47 is $510,000. Dave's strategy is more elaborate, more active, more expensive, more visible, and his net worth is $90,000. The financial industry has $1 trillion collective incentive to convince you that sophistication requires activity because a low-cost index fund held for 2 decades requires nothing from an intermediary except to stay out of the way. So they manufacture complexity. They turn normal market volatility into a reason to call your advisor. They make sitting still feel irresponsible. And then they charge you a percentage of everything you own annually for the performance of making you feel like you need them. The real scoreboard does not care how sophisticated your strategy sounds. It only measures what compounds.